look at the wider implications of all this for Canada's economy and security. Jeff Nankivell is president of the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada. He also held several diplomatic roles in China, including Consul General for Hong Kong and Macau. Mr. Nankivell, good to have you on Primetime Politics.
Thanks for having me.
So your predecessor at the foundation, Stuart Beck, says Chinese behavior is providing something of a wake-up call for Canada's approach to China on foreign policy and trade, that we need closer alignment with the United States. Do you agree that's what Canada needs to be doing right now?
Well, I think there's no question about the wake-up call part of that we are, there have been behaviors of China's party state, the regime in Beijing, over the years, particularly since Xi Jinping became the paramount leader in China a decade ago, that we've seen very aggressive moves in the foreign policy sphere, including in China's own neighborhood, the militarization of the South China Sea, and within China itself and territories that China controls. We've seen a crackdown in Hong Kong, and new waves of repression within mainland China as well, and lots of evidence of activities of agents of China through different channels being active in countries including Canada, and I think the recent revelations have put some specific details in play on that, and it's definitely shaping opinion in Canada. Although I think it's important to note that the events at the moment, the issue of the moment, which is about the expulsion of a diplomat from China's consulate in Toronto, is not the result of a recent action by China. It's the result of something that reportedly happened or was reported 2 years ago. So it doesn't represent in itself something new by China, and I think that's important to keep in mind as we talk about the ramifications of all this.
And China has, of course, retaliated by expelling a Canadian diplomat, and the government has used language such as being resolute in saying that Canada alone is going to be responsible for the consequences of all this. So how concerned should Canadians be about more Chinese escalation?
Well, I think you have to keep in mind that all politics is domestic, and so for the Chinese leadership, they are responding also to their domestic audiences, as do political leaders in Canada and elsewhere. And so the expulsion of a Chinese diplomat from Canada is something that politically demands a very strong response from the government in China. So I think no one was surprised at the immediate tit for tat expulsion of a Canadian consular diplomat from Shanghai. That said, I don't think we see evidence that China is really looking for a fight with Canada at the moment. As I mentioned, the specific incident that we are all reacting to now is something that took place a couple of years ago. So I don't see a kind of a deliberate ratcheting up by China. So I think we'll have to see if there are further measures for instance, in the trade sphere by China. But I wouldn't assume that there will be. Now, that said, there are well-known risks to depending on China as a trade partner, or to make it real, for Canadians, if you're a company depending on China, as your main customer. The nature of the regime in China, particularly in the last decade, is such that there are inherent risks there, and those risks are there today as they were 5 years ago, and that is the risk of arbitrary measures that you can have in an authoritarian system, that your particular export, your good or service that you're exporting to China, there's an extra risk of arbitrary measures being imposed for political reasons by the authorities in China that is not the same as the risk that you face if your customers are in Western Europe or indeed in other parts of Asia that don't have a similar kind of dynamic to China. So I think there is a special risk that comes with doing business in China, as there is for some other places around the world. I don't think that the risk is really significantly higher, today than it was a week ago. I think we've seen this tit for tat response on the diplomatic expulsions, but I think we'll have to wait and see evidence that there's an appetite on the part of Beijing to escalate, and I haven't seen that yet. I just discount the rhetoric at the moment because it is, as I say, I think it's a political gesture for a domestic audience in China. Sometimes that rhetoric is accompanied by subsequent action, but if you look at the cases in recent years, there are other times when strong rhetoric from Beijing is not accompanied by specific actions.
Okay, let's, I guess, widen the scope of the conversation a bit, because the Canadian government does have its Indo-Pacific strategy released last year. It included not just more attention to threats from China in the economic sphere and the military sphere, but it also does include a lot about reducing Canada's reliance on Chinese trade and diversifying our economic impact, our economic influence across the Asia-Pacific. So do the recent events involving foreign interference really galvanize that idea of a reset? Does it do anything to, I guess, speed up what's perhaps already in motion?
Well, I think there is the point here is that there is a lot that was in motion already. So under this Indo-Pacific strategy, and I should mention, in the interest of transparency, that the Asia-Pacific Foundation of Canada was named as a partner for the government that would be receiving additional resources for us to do work with a physical presence in Asia for the first time, to work in the areas that we work on as a national public institution independent from government, which is to promote greater understanding, mutual understanding and awareness between Canada and Asia, and that's all of Asia. But the strategy itself is, a lot of it is about trade diversification, and that's about putting resources into those parts of Asia that have been less well developed as markets for Canada. And I think what you'll see as a result of the strategy being rolled out in the coming months and years is a greater focus on other areas. Southeast Asia is an area of tremendous promise. India is in a much better demographic position than China and offers a lot of opportunities. And I think we have renewed opportunities in mature markets of Japan and Korea. But once again, I don't know that the events of this week will have a really significant impact on that, except to the extent that the companies who are making their own choices, Canadian businesses and institutions, who already have adopted a cautious view when it comes to expanding their business ties with China, it will probably give them additional pause for thought.
Okay, we'll certainly have to keep watching developments as they unfold. Jeff Nankivell, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thanks a lot. It's been a pleasure.